Hello everyone. So welcome back. After we set up the database in the last session, now we would like to use PHP to run queries through the code and without actually taking the data from the arrays that we did. So in the last class, what we did was, in the last session, what we did, we started a PHP file, which is the stuff.php, and in the file we created an array called stuff, and inside the array we added the items one by one, and then we used the for each loop to iterate over the list of items, and then we listed the items on the page that we saw. So in the stuff page we saw all the list of 8 items that we added, and what we want to do now is we want to get these items from the database, because we don't want to create a page where we need to, every time an item is added, we have to go to the code to make the changes. We want these items to be reflected automatically from the database. So this will be more scalable. So the addition, deletion, updation of all the items can happen at the database. Okay, and then these are automatically reflected in the stuff.php page. So how would we do that? So let's go step by step on seeing how we can achieve this. So if you remember, we created a database called store, and inside the store database we created a table called stuff, and this table has four columns, ID, name, image, and price. And then we also have a list of items that we added. We have 8 items. I added 5. I will add the remaining ones once the session is complete. So what we want to do right now is we want to get these list of items from here. Now, to do that, we have to follow a certain set of steps to make database connections and requests, and creating a query, running the query, getting the results, and processing the results, so that the items are exactly as it was done from the array hard-coded inside the PHP file. So how would we do that? So let's have a graphical representation of what we are going to do, and we're going to do step by step once we finish one part of the representation, and then we'll go back. So in the last class, what we did was we created a store database, and inside the database we created a table called stuff. Now the client here is the browser. So whenever we request a page from the browser, here in this case we are requesting the stuff.php page, it makes this request to the server. Currently, we know that the server itself is our computer because we are using a local development server, but the case is the same even if you're using a server hosted in the cloud. Okay, so what we do is we request the stuff.php page. The request goes to an application server because PHP is not an HTML page, so it has to be compiled and converted into an HTML page so it can be seen by the browser. So, and this is the responsibility of the application server. The application server receives this stuff.php page, and then if we are not using any database constructs here, what it does is it replies back to the client with the compiled version of the PHP page, which we did for the previous examples, you know, the index page or the contact page, or the stuff.php page without any database constructs. But the issue now is we want to replace it with a database construct. So we need to make a connection to the MySQL database server that is also running along with the server. So how would we do that? The first step in doing that is to create connection variables. And once these connection variables are created and initialized, we would make a connection to the database server. And this is how it is done. Once the connection variables, these variables are host name, which is where the database server is residing, the physical server, and then the username and password because it has to be secure, and then you have the database name because the connection has to be unique for a specific database. If in a database server you have multiple databases, so but you want to have one connection per database. And then you can also provide a port. A port is not necessary for every connection you do. Some connections have a port and some connections do not have a port. If you remember the last session, I told you that if you open your browser and if you navigate to your local host, and if you don't see any numbers after the colon, that means you are using the default port, which is 80. All HTTP requests run on the port 80. But sometimes you install a local development server which has a port automatically configured. In here, my local host is configured to listen to requests coming to port 8888. So in this case, I will see that port over here. If something is like this over here, then the database is also residing at listening to the requests on this server, which has the port of 888. So what do we do? Let's go step by step of how we can create database requests in our PHP file. So the step one that we have to do is we have to create and initialize the DB connection variables, the ones that I explained it to you now. So the host is, for us, because it's residing on our own computer, this would be localhost. It can be replaced by the IP address or the domain name of a server if it's residing on a cloud-based server. Okay? In the other case, the other variable is the username. The username that we have by default is root, which is same for every local development server that you have, if you have not changed it. Okay? And then we have the password variable, and this variable is set to root for my case. But usually if you're using XAMPP, this password is empty. So empty means that you just have to use two quotations without any space, just two quotations, opening and closing. If you use single quotations, it should look like this. If you're using single quotations, it should look like this. Or if you're using double quotations, it should look like this. There should not be any space. Space means there is a password. So it will again cause you errors. So it's better that you don't do that. Okay, so if you have to put it empty. But in my case, it's not empty. So I will be using root. And then next thing that we have is the database name, right? In our case, we created the database called store. And then we have to provide a port because I'm using a port. But in your case, if you're not using a port, if you don't see any numbers beside the local host, then what you do, you just remove. You don't even create the variable. Okay, you just leave it empty. Don't leave it empty because you cannot do that over here. Either you can use port 80, or you leave it. You don't even create the variable. So okay, which is fine. Now once I do that, the next step number 2, is to establish the connection with the DB server, which is MySQL in our case. What we are going to do is there is this function which does that, MySQL I underscore connect, and we pass on all the variables that we just created, which is host and username and password, and then we have the database name and then the port number. If you don't have port, just don't put the port variable here. It's just finish your close your function bracket after the database. Okay, and then what we need to do is, once this connection is established, it creates a handle. So it returns you back a handle. And you have to store this handle. So next time, whenever you make a request to the database, you have to pass this handle. Otherwise, it will not run. Okay. So what we want to do right now is we want to go back, and over here, we want to save this inside a handle. This handle is the way that you are going to make requests in the future to the database server, because it knows that you are connecting to this specific database server and to this specific database. Okay. Once you do that, step 3, the third step that you need to consider over here is to check for errors. Because sometimes you might know what might happen is the username is incorrect, or the password is incorrect, or the port number is incorrect, or the database you are trying to reach is not there. Okay, the host name is down, maybe the server is down. So you have to check for errors. If you don't do that, what will happen is the page will be shown and it will not have any items. So the user doesn't know what happened. So you have to keep the user informed. So how would you do that? So in PHP, you have another function which has the error codes saved. Okay, so it's called MySQL connect underscore ERRNO. Okay, this is the, and it will include and it will pass the connection variables. So what happens is you try to make the connection, and if the connection is not established for some reason, it will, if it's established, this value will be 0. If it is not established, this value will be an error code which is more than 0. Okay, so what will happen over here is once this value is more than 0, the actual description of the error is stored inside another function. Okay, so what we can do is we can use that MySQLi underscore connect underscore error. Okay, so this is the place where you will find the description of the error. Maybe it says invalid username or password or something like that. Okay, and then we have to exit. Why exit? Because I don't want to continue with the code. Exit will stop the running of the code. Okay, just for now, for time being, I'm going to add an else just to check if something is working or not. And I'm going to echo and here say connection established successfully. Okay, and I'll exit again because I just want to check whether the connection is established or not. I want to show you different types of errors that might happen. So what we'll do is we'll save this page and we'll go back to our stuff.php page, and you can see that the connection was established successfully. That means the MySQL error, MySQL connect, MySQLi underscore connect underscore error now returned a value of 0. Okay. Now what I would do is let's make an error on purpose. Let's make localhost 123, which is not a host that I have. So, and then when I try to refresh this page, it will tell me that the server name that I provided did not come up with a result. So it did not, there is no actual server which is localhost 123 listening to my requests. Okay, which is understandable because it's not there, right? Now suppose I change my username and I go back and I refresh the page. Here it will give me that the user root123 at localhost is using a password, but something happened. Either the username is wrong or the password is wrong. Okay? This will happen even if I change the password. It will do the same error probably because it just tell you that using root at localhost, but the problem is again access denied. So that means the username and password is incorrect. Another one is if I change the name of the database. So if I go back and refresh this, say unknown database. So that means it established the connection, but when it started looking in the database server to find the list of databases, to find your specific database, it was not available. So it will give you an error saying that the database doesn't exist. And otherwise, if everything is okay, it will start continue and say, okay, yeah, you are okay. So you will be here. So I don't want to add this over here because if it is okay, then I will just continue with my query. All right, so I will just remove that and then I'll refresh this page. So currently that means if the page is showing, that means that everything happened correctly. If the page will stop showing, that means I have an error. There is a better way to represent if there is an error, a 500 page saying that sorry, there is some error happened on the page and come back again. Okay, and then you can send an email to the administrator saying that something happened, just please fix your page. And this all logic goes here. But for our case, we are not going to go into that details. Okay, so I'm going to just say echo and exit the page. Okay, the next part that we are concerned about, the third step that we have to do, step 3. The third step is to create the query, which is the most important step. So the connection was established with the database and it's successfully. So now I have to create the query that I want to run. In our case, we want to get the list of all the items in the stuff table. So, and that's a simple select query. If you remember the database course, you have to just run a simple select query. So what do? We first of all store our query inside a variable because we want to send this as an argument when we run the query. And the query that we want to run is select star from the name of the database, the name of the table, sorry, because the database is already there. So name of the table was stuff. That's it. We just want to get the list of all the items from the database. So the query would be select star from stuff. Okay, this is my query. Step number 4 would be to run the query. Run the query. Okay. How would I run the query? Again, there is a command to do that. MySQLi underscore query. Okay, and then you pass on 2 parameters. The handle of the connection, you remember I need to pass on the handle of the connection. So once I do that, what I need to do, and I need to run the query, I need to pass on 2 things, the query itself and the connection handle. So this would be $con, which we created above here, and then we will pass on the query. Okay, and this also returns the result. So I have to store this inside something called as the result. any variable, doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be resulted specifically. So it has to be stored somewhere. So once I do this, once I run the query, I store the result. I would want to process the result, which is the last step. I want to process the result of the query. This is a tricky part. So you need to listen very carefully, because this is a tricky part of processing results. The value of the result differs based on the type of query you are running. If it is a update query, the value will be different. If it is a delete query, the value will be different. If it's a select query or retrieval query, then the value will be different. So we will learn in the future sessions of what will be the value of result when we are running a delete query or an update query. So currently we are running a select query. So what do we expect when we run a select query? We expect a table, right? A table with columns with a result, because we are using select star. So it should return the whole table back to us. Okay. So what we are going to do is we are going to see first what we are. So we have a command in PHP called var dump. It will just give me the dump of the result, whatever the result comes back. Okay. So we are going to do that just to see what it does. And I'm going to exit. So because I don't want to continue until we fix these small issues. Okay. So I'm going to dump the result and I'm going to exit the page. So this is the result that comes back. So whenever I run the query, I connect to the stored database. I run the query on the table returns back the result, and the result goes back to my database server, and the database server now currently holds the result. This is the table that I received, because a select query will always return back a table. It can be one row or multiple rows, or it can be just a single value, depends upon what the query is. So, but the value is actually comes back and stored inside the database server in a temporary location. So what we need to do now is, let's see what the query returns back. So I'm going to refresh the page. You can see over here that when I run the query, I do not get the results. I don't see the results. Can you see the results over here? I just get some information. It's an object. The value that I return is an object. And it says that the current field is 0. The field count is 4. That means it has 4 columns. The length is not given. The number of rows is 5, which is true, because in the database table, if you remember, I have 5 rows and 4 columns, which is correct. And the type is also not given. So we have, and the current field is actually, it's supposed to be the pointer, which I will explain in that little while. So what is happening over here is, whenever we run a query, what we receive, you see, what we receive is not the result. The result is stored in a temporary location inside the database server. What we receive is a pointer to that result, which includes information about the result. It doesn't include the actual result. It includes a pointer with the information about the result. Number of rows, number of columns, the current pointer inside the table, and other information as we just saw. So it has some information, but it doesn't have the actual results. So how do we get the actual results is the main issue. So you have to query each result one by one. How do we do that? Okay, so there is a function provided by MySQL. What it does is, it will say MySQL I underscore fetch underscore ASOC. ASOC stands for Associative Array, or you can even call it as an array. Okay, so ASOC is the one that we are going to use. You can look up the differences between array and ASOC. It's not that difficult. It's similar. It's an array will be not an associative array, a regular array. But if you're using ASOC, it will be an associative array. The value that you get back is an associative array. Okay, so and then we have to pass on the result, because it is stored inside. This is the pointer. So we pass the pointer to get the row. Now what do we receive? What do we expect to receive? Will we receive the complete result? Let's see. I'm going to back again. I'll refresh it. Now you can see that I received some result. I can see some numbers. But you can see that what I receive is just one row. I receive only one row. I did not receive the complete result again. So what it does is, every time you send a fetch request, it will give you back one row. And then the pointer is incremented. Let's do one more thing. So I'm going to go back again and say var dump, and this time again I am going to print the result. Okay, so now you can see that the first line is the first line over here is the item which is I received, and then here you can see now the current field is this, the field count for, length array for, and here somewhere around this path, something moved, something changed, which is here, that means it's going to the first item. So the pointer is now, and each time I run it again, it will take me to the second one. Okay, now how do we do that? Let's go back and then repeat this. I repeat this again over here. Since it is doing on the same line, I would like to have a break inside over here. Okay, so let's go back, refresh the page. You can see that this is the first item and this is the second item. Every time I'm running the same command, I'm not even changing the command, I'm just copying and pasting, and then go back again. See, I get the third one. So every time you want to request an item from the result, you have to keep on asking it. So you cannot get the whole result. You have to keep on asking until it finishes. Okay, so let's me do this again so that you can see. I'll do it. So we have 5. You remember we had 5 results. Let's see what will happen if I do it 6 times. Okay, let's refresh it. You see, I got 5, and once it finished, I got null. That means now it's telling me that you got all the 5 items, and the last item that you requested doesn't exist in the result table. Okay, so how can we get it? Now I cannot do this. I cannot, because every result may have 10 rows, 15 rows. I cannot do it this way. So I have to use a loop. Now, we cannot use a for loop. You remember the structure of the for loop? The for loop expects that you have a complete array. But here, we don't have a complete array. We have just a single row from each one. So the best option in this case is to use the while loop. See, the while loop will keep on running until it goes to null, which is the best thing that we need right now. So we will get the while loop. Now, in the while loop, what should be the condition? Remember, if we run the fetch instruction, we get the row. So I can just say MySQL I underscore fetch underscore assoc, and this time I'm going to say result. Okay, so each time, MySQL I fetch assoc and the result. Now what will happen is each time I make a request, it will return something. So if it is not 0, it will go inside. As soon as it becomes null, it will stop. Okay, and then I can continue. Right? So let's do this. Let's say, for example, I will just echo here, say in the loop, just to show you, and then echo. I want to have a break. Okay, save this, and then I'll go back, refresh this. You see, I got this 5 times. I'm getting it 5 times only, because once it became null, it stopped. It doesn't go inside the while loop. So that means we are partially successful. Now what we want to do is we want to get each value from the row. Okay, so we want to store this. Whenever we are getting the fetch, we get back a row. So we have to store the row somewhere in a variable. So I'm going to store that row inside a variable. And this row is an associative array. Associative array means it has indexes inside it. Okay, if you have the username, you have the name, you have the price, and we have the image. So you have all these 3 things there. Now what we want to do is we want to store them inside our array, because what we expect is we need an array, because our code assumes that we have an array. Now we already created the array over here, if you remember that, right? So we created the product array. So I'm going to just cut this and create this at the top here. Okay, so now I have an empty array. Now what I will do is I will just take one of them and put them here inside. and then I start replacing it, right? So what is 101? I don't have 101 right now, right? So I have to get 101 from here, from the table. You remember 101 is already there inside the database. So 101 is the ID. So $row here, when it comes back, it is a single row, and that row has ID, name, image, and price. So how do we get that? How do we get this? So we just go inside, remove 101, and we say $row, which is the first row, which is an associative array. Associative array means I can access it by using a key, and the key here is ID. Where is this ID coming from? This ID is the same name of the row that you used over here, because this is coming from the database, right? The row is coming from the database. Similarly, the name is here will remain because these are the keys that I am creating myself. So here is the one that we are going to receive from the database, and this will become $row. And what will be the key over here? Name, because with this name is again from the database here. And then the path, the image path again will become $row, and here this one will become img, which is again coming from here, from the database. And then the final one is the price, which is again $row price. Okay, so what we did was, instead of adding one by one, we added just once. And what will happen? Each time this loop creates a fetch request, it will get a single row. That row is stored inside row variable, which is an associative array of a single dimension, which will have 4 keys. Why 4 keys? Because our table has 4 columns. So it will return row by row. Each row will have, it's an associative array, so it will have key and values. So this will be the key and this is the value. Okay. Once we receive that, what we will do is we will store them inside our array that we created, which is stuff. Because this is what we are going to use later on to display the list of items, right? And that's it. That's it. So all of this that we did are now useless. I don't need them anymore because I'm going to receive them from the database. So let's save this now and let's go back to our page and refresh our page now. You see, I get 5 items because now I have 5 items in my database. If I have 8 items, I will get 8 items over here. Okay? So this is how you run a database query in PHP. Okay? So just to give you an overview, the first step, and then just to go back, each time you make a fetch, and then once all the requests that come, the stuff page is received, and then you will get back your stuff PHP page, which is compiled as an HTML, because what we receive over here is not a PHP page, it's an HTML page. How do we know that? Just go back to inspect element, and you see this. See this is li, and each li will have, see this, there is no PHP code, it's all HTML because it's converted and compiled into HTML. Okay, so this is what happens. So again, to summarize, the steps that we need to do to create a database is first create the connection variables, and then we need to make the connection, and then we have to handle the errors. Why? Because we don't want to continue executing the page if there are some errors. Okay, if there are no errors, it will jump back to step number, this should be step 4, right? It should be step 4, 5, and 6. So step 4 is to create the query, and then step 5 is to run the query and store the results inside the result variable. Now this result variable, the value differs based on the different types of queries you execute. Now here we are executing a select query, right? So in select query, we receive a table. Now the access to the table cannot be done. We do not receive the complete table. We receive a pointer to the table. But this pointer allows us to receive one row at a time. So since we are receiving one row at a time, we cannot use the for loop. So in this case, we have to use a different loop. A while loop will continue running until we receive null, which is the best option in our case right now. So we'll use a while loop. And the while loop, we will get the fetch request and store the fetch request in a row variable. And then when you go inside, this row is an associative array because we are running fetch assoc. If we run fetch array, it will be a regular array. So we don't have to use ID, name, image, and price. We can say row 0, row 1, row 2, row 3. But this is better. Associative array means we need to use the names. And what are these names? What are these keys? Where do we get the keys from? These keys are from the database. From here, the rows of your database, the columns of your database, sorry. Okay? And then we store them inside our stuff that we created before. Okay? Previously, we used to put the stuff dynamically. Okay? So this is how we complete the database handling of the code. In the next one, we will run different types of queries. But before we run different types of queries, we need to learn something about how requests are sent from the server, from the client to the server. There are two types of requests that are sent, and this is what we will learn in the next sessions.